All right, welcome back. To help us and to unpack the international desk has for us for this coming week, we're now joined by SABC News international reporter Khayelihle Khumalo. Khayelihle, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back from Africa Week in London. You must be jet lagged.
Well, very much so. I am, Unati, but a very interesting time where you had so many scholars from Africa, so many experts, the diplomats really looking at all the critical issues facing the African continent pertaining to peace and security, economic integration, development, essentially all these challenges that are facing the continent. So it's been a very fascinating week indeed.
Yeah, we'll come back to just some of those challenges in the continent when we discuss what's on the menu for SADC. But let's look at the Middle East now. I mean, that conflict escalating. We now, of course, know that the Gulf countries are being very worried and watching the developments very closely. Just bring us up to speed in terms of what you are monitoring at the moment.
Well, precisely, Nati. It's a very tense situation in the Middle East, especially where we've seen also an apology coming from the Iranian president, Pezeshkian, really saying that they're not targeting these countries because of animosity, but what they're chasing, it's around the U.S. interest in those countries, because quite a lot of them, they do have the military bases that are hosting the U.S. infrastructure in terms of the military gear and stuff. But also what is very concerning in this regard is that we've seen this apology, but today we've also seen sporadic attacks in Kuwait at some instances, targeting also the energy infrastructure. So it's a very worrisome situation, Unati, but we know that for South Africa, the whole issue of the evacuation of South Africans who are in this part of the world, there's the intensification of making sure that they speed up the process in this regard.
And the bulk of them we've seen are in the UAE, you know, with most South Africans saying that you come to, a place like Dubai, as an example, you're expecting it to be the safest in the world, and most that are stationed, particularly in those U.S. infrastructure that you talked about, are the places that are most dangerous at this point in time. I understand it's around 6,200 people that are being, evacuated.
Well, that's right, Unati, and the South African authorities, they continue to tell people to register their presence through South Africa's diplomatic missions. But also what is very concerning also in this regard, Unati, is that some of the hotels, I mean, we've seen the debris, some of the missiles being intercepted. So the rationale from Tehran is that some of the troops from the US, they've been moved away from the bases into the hotels. So it's a very precarious situation where some of the South Africans are there, but they're just caught up in this particular situation. But obviously a lot of people are still calling for de-escalation. I mean, for example, we've heard from the Chinese foreign minister calling for a dialogue in this particular instance, saying that a full-blown conflict won't help anyone, especially given the very significance of the Middle East, whether aviation, the global supply chains, and many other things.
And of course, that humanitarian angle also that we are monitoring in terms of the casualties that are there already in the Middle East. All right, let's move now to what is on SADC's agenda. We know that South Africa, of course, assumes that role of SADC chair in around August. But what can we expect this week?
So we're going to expect a lot tonight from the Council of the Ministers meetings. So essentially these are meetings really just in the run-up to August, where they really look at a number of issues around industrialization, around the issue of promoting intra-trade between the bloc itself, because I mean currently it stands about 23%, but also issues of peace and security. It's a very big issue for SADC. I mean, we saw that coup in Madagascar, they're still seized with the issue of the normalization of the political situation in Madagascar. Unati, as you know, that South Africa took over as the interim chair, but officially that's when the big handover will happen in August.
Let's wrap our discussion with, a very busy schedule for President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's off to Brazil on a state visit. Give us a sense of what is likely to be on that agenda.
It's going to be a very interesting one tonight. We know that Brazil and South Africa, these are BRICS members, these are G20 members, these are IPSA members. So they have quite a lot of commonalities when you look at their foreign policy, but also in terms of making sure that they boost the whole issue around bilateral relations, economic relations, looking at tourism, for example. So it's going to be a very interesting one, especially because it's a state visit as well, where President Ramaphosa will be accorded all the, special honors really given to the head of state. And also, I mean, this is a very interesting time, especially with South Africa as a G20 member, where they've taken a bit of a step back with the current situation from the US. So Brazil has always been a supporter of South Africa. It dates back to the time of G20, even far beyond that. So there's quite a lot really expected between the two countries.
Khayelihle, thank you so much for that. Of course, Khayelihle Khumalo, SABC News international reporter, just keeping us up to speed in terms of what we can expect this week.